It's me back at the desk. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. I mean, I don't know why I get just real aggressive when I hear Nick's voice. Hi, I'm A.M. Grabelny. I'm one of your hosts here for our live coverage at reInvent with AWS OnAir. This is going to be one of my favorite segments. This is always one of my favorite segments at every event we do because we're going to get to talk to an AWS hero, Farah. But first, I want to talk to you. Please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Farah Campbell. I am the head of developer advisory at AWS. But fun fact, I used to be an AWS Serverless Heroes. So this is the program that's near and dear to my heart.
And
yes,
the star of the show.
That's me.
That's you.
I think.
Jeremy Daly, please tell the people about you.
Yeah, so I'm Jeremy Daly. I'm a AWS Serverless Hero. I'm newly the director of research at an amazing company in Boston called Cloud Zero. And we are doing some very cool stuff with some AI and ML and building a very cool data platform. And so we are a serverless company. We're all on Lambda and a bunch of great serverless services. So I'm looking forward to applying my serverless hero-ness to the people at Cloud Zero.
Speaking of heroes, we are currently up in the U.S., so if you're joining us from the United States, welcome to the stream. So we're being featured there. Come on in, ask questions. We're learning all about what's going on at reInvent, and if anybody knows what's going on at reInvent, it's got to be Jeremy. Jeremy's pretty well connected. Jeremy, we were just saying, it's been a long time, but you and I have been working together forever.
Yep.
Farah, you probably know Jeremy even longer than me. You know everybody.
This is Jeremy and I think, what is it, our seventh reInvent together?
Sixth or seventh.
Yeah.
I know, it's been a while.
It's been a long time. But guess what?
Tell me.
This year is 10 years.
10 years of
Lambda.
AWS Lambda.
Oh. You know, my sister and my wife, they sometimes will watch this footage, and then they do an impression of me. And do you know what the impression is? Lambda, 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 because that's all I talk about too.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm excited for 10 years of Lambda.
Yeah.
What was your first memory of working with AWS Lambda, Jeremy?
Yeah, so I had been working with AWS for a long time. I was not coming to reInvents in the chaos and magical amazingment that this is, but I was using the console. We were using DynamoDB. We were using EC2 instances, doing some really cool things. I started using AWS before there were like load balancers and all kinds of stuff, so very, very early on. But then in early 2015, I happened to see the announcement about Lambda going GA. I had no idea what it was. So I'm in the console, I'm clicking around, I see this thing, and I immediately thought when it was like, run code without servers, and again, yes, there are servers and serverless, we all know that, but but when I first saw that, I was like, this is a really interesting paradigm, because my whole life I was spinning up a server or had to have a shared space or something like that where I could run the simplest bit of code, and it just was insane to me that like I have to provision an EC2 instance to like just set up a webhook, like it just made no sense to me. So when I saw that, I'm like, this is really interesting. Then I started playing around with it. I'm like, okay, there's no API gateway. There's no way to route HTTP traffic to it. There was no VPC, so I couldn't connect to a database or things like that. So I played around with it a little bit, did some DynamoDB things, but it wasn't until 2016 when they released the VPC stuff where I was able to connect to an Elasticache cluster. And we had just acquired a company at the company I was at that had a Cassandra ring. It was so slow to query this thing. So I used Lambda to basically build an interface where it would query the data from the Cassandra ring, but then it would put it into an Elasticache cluster so that they would, because again, it wasn't like the data was constantly changing. It's just that the way, so when people would request something, I would put it in the cache. So I kind of built a write through cache with Lambda. And it worked amazing. And then ever since then, I just started basically building everything with it.
All right. Well, I mean, I've told this story a lot too. Lambda's what got me into AWS. I was not using AWS prior to Lambda at all. I was just writing code, and I looked at AWS and I was like, well, it's EC2, I just write code. What am I going to do? I'm not an ops person.
Right.
And Lambda was one of the first times where I was like, wow, this is really interesting. This is for me, like writing code and just deploying it. Jeremy, I know we just blew past this too, because I assume, maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly, that everybody knows what an AWS hero is.
Oh, yeah.
But I love talking to the heroes about being a hero, because to me it's fascinating. The whole program, I've watched over the years. I've met some of the greatest people of my life, not even just in tech, but
Like
just
us two, right? You're talking about us two.
I am actually. Yes,
thank you,
I
thank
am. I know. Farrah, always wanting my affirmation.
I need them today.
Okay.
I'm in need of positive affirmations today.
You know, I deeply care about you both. But yeah, so I always like to hear about the AWS Heroes program, what it means to the individual heroes.
Yeah.
And what is it, first off?
Yeah, so I mean, the Heroes program is basically, it's a way in which AWS recognizes people in the community who do, who contribute to, and it's not just like spreading the AWS message. Like I always kind of say, I don't fall in love with a company. I fall in love with the people who work there. I create the relationships with the people who work there. And so, that's what happens, right? Like the people at AWS, the people on the DevRel teams and the SAs and all that, they create these relationships with people like me who are out there who love the services themselves. We do a lot of really interesting things with these services. We write blog posts, we do podcasts, we do things like that.
You create musicals.
We create musicals every once in a while, yeah. And then that connection that we create, it's this really great feedback loop where we get to really, I mean, I have lifelong friends now that I've met, worked at AWS, as well as the community around it, and it's just an amazing experience. So basically, the idea is we contribute ideas, we help other people, we give feedback on products. They don't let us name things, which I wish they would. But it's just great, and it's just an amazing experience, and the teams here treat us really, really well, and they really care about our opinions because we're out there in the field using this stuff day to day, talking to people in the community. So it's a really, really great program. I think there's 230 heroes now.
236 globally.
236 heroes now. So it's a good growing program. It's absolutely amazing.
Very nice. Very nice. What do you want to ask, Jeremy? Farrah?
Well, I'm really, really curious. I want to know what was a project where you decided that really, really saw Lambda shine?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, the first time that I used it in a real sort of production-y type thing was with that Cassandra ring thing. But what I love about this notion of just having this on-demand compute is that it's perfect for a bunch of these workloads that, again, like whether it's just a webhook or something like that, but like let's say I want to do, I want to read off a Kinesis stream, right? So we were reading off of Kinesis streams actually at this old company, and the way that we would do it is we would set up a Docker container, we'd run a Docker container, we had Ruby, we'd use the Ruby Kinesis library to query this thing, and then it would, if it fell over, then we'd spin it back up, and I'd have to, find the checkpoint, read back. So it was just like a pain to manage that piece of it. And then there's a thing with Lambda called ESMs, which is event source mappings, that just allow you to connect to SQS and Kinesis and DynamoDB streams and all these other services that all you do is just basically say listen on that. And then it just sends the data to Lambda, and when there's data there, it responds to it. And again, you have the power of AWS Lambda, which you can then obviously connect to other services and so forth. But that is such a powerful, this idea of event-driven applications, it's such a powerful paradigm that for a lot of the workloads that we build, it's like, I'm not spinning up a pod in Kubernetes just to do this one simple thing. It just makes no sense. It's a waste of resources. So that the idea of those event source mapping, so I mean, any project that you're doing, that you're reading off of a stream or you're reading off of a queue or something like that, or again, EventBridge, which is an amazing service.
I love EventBridge,
so amazing, and you can do all kinds of really cool things with that as well. And then of course, Lambda works as that, that sort of glue, right? And so all these, what is AWS up to now? 2,658 services, I think, whatever it is. I mean, I don't know, whatever it is. But basically,
incredibly accurate there. No, I don't think quite that many.
Not that many, but
we're getting up there.
Right,
sure.
But Lambda is a glue that sticks all this stuff together, and it's just absolutely amazing. So, yeah, that's where it really shines. I mean, I will say, if you have something that's like a steady state API, and you've got some of these things that, maybe ECS is a better choice there. I mean, there's a lot of really great things, a lot of great services that AWS has. I'm going to give a shout out to App Runner because I love App Runner. If the App Runner team's listening, thank you for all that you do. And if anybody else is listening, I love App Runner, so I'm just going to say that.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Jeremy, I'm checking. No one's watching.
Nobody's watching.
Nobody's here. No,
How do we have negative views right now?
It's actually going down somehow beyond zero. There's a ton of people watching. There's a ton of people in chat, too. A bunch of people. One person is in particular saying I make them uncomfortable, so that's great. Mission accomplished.
Perfect.
Yeah, so Jeremy, look, I love Lambda's connective tissue, right? That's what sold me on it too. It was like, so I was working at a company called Box when I first found Lambda, and we were doing all this API-driven stuff, and to stand up an entire server just to call an API endpoint,
Right.
it was so, yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, and so that one of my first experiences where I was like, I love this so much. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting. That's a great question, because with Fargate and a lot of things that are going on with Fargate and ECS, as well as, again, App Runner, which is a great, I'm going to shout out again, it's a great service to spin up containers.
App Runner needs positive affirmations today,
Yes,
too,
they
so I'm
do.
glad you're giving it to them.
Love App Runner. I mean, and the thing I love about App Runner, it's a very specific use case for hosting containers with an HTTP endpoint, right?
Get that container up.
And the load balancer is built in, like it's great. So I think that we see this with AWS all the time. There's a lot of services that kind of overlap one another, right? So the famous 19 ways to spin up a container and so forth. I mean, there's not really 19 ways, but I mean, there's a bunch of different ways, and it's cool that you have different options. But I do see that, containerization, like deploying a Lambda function using the container packaging format, like we've actually kind of switched to doing a lot of that instead of the zip. And sometimes because you get better storage or more code that you can load into the Lambda function, a little better performance on cold starts and things like that. So those are like really, really useful ways to do it. And then you can use all those other container tools and stuff like that. So I think that we're going to see some of these concepts merging together. I think that containerization, as much as we had a battle, serverless versus containers, many, many years ago, I think that there's a very happy marriage between those different paradigms.
Okay.
And it's also important too that Lambda is serverless compute, right?
Yes.
Not to be confused with serverless in general, which is sort of serviceful. Some people call it, managed services, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be an interesting sort of marriage of all these different technologies just to give us an amazing experience in the future.
Well, Jeremy, I think we could fill the rest of the show just
Absolutely.
talking to you.
I'll be here all week.
You know what? I'm going to call it. We are going to do that. So we have to go. Unfortunately, we will be back with more. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you
Jeremy.
for having me.
You stick around.
Bye, everyone.